Alright, so this one's called the dualistic aspect of nature. And I kind of had this idea in my head already about just the dualistic aspect of things, but I picked up this book today, and it's the essays and poems of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is a kind of American scholar and poet. And I was reading one of his essays, and he talked about this exact thing, so I was like, yeah, that's a good one to talk about, because one part I was reading kind of hit the nail on the head of what I was thinking about. So I'll just read this little section first, and it will kind of set the foundation. So, polarity, or action and reaction, we meet in every part of nature, in darkness and light, in heat and cold, in the ebb and flow of waters, in male and female, in the inspiration and expiration of plants and animals, in the equation of quantity and quality in the fluids of the animal body, in the systole and diastole of the heart, in the undulations of the fluids and of sound, in the centrifugal and centripetal gravity, in electricity, galvanism, and chemical affinity. Superinduced magnetism at one end of a needle. The opposite magnetism takes place at the other end. If the south attracts, the north repels. To empty here, you must condense there. An inevitable dualism bisects nature, so that each thing is a half, and suggests another thing to make it whole. As spirit and matter, man and woman, odd, even, subjective, objective, in, out, upper, under, motion and rest. While the world is thus dual, so is every one of its parts. The entire system of things gets represented in every particle. There is somewhat that resembles the ebb and flow of the sea, day and night, man and woman, and a single needle of the pine, and a kernel of corn, in each individual of every tribe. The reaction, so grand in the elements, is repeated within these small boundaries. So I thought that was kind of hitting the nail on the head, I guess, of the whole topic of the dualistic aspect of nature, and more than just nature, just everything in the universe, I guess. And if you look at every story, there's always going to be some villain and hero. There's going to be this force or this group and this group, and they're opposing each other. It's always a war between two different things. So there's life and death, order and chaos, cold and heat, light and dark, positive and negative, the north and the south. I mean, there's so many different things that we just categorize into this dualistic system. And as far as I guess attraction and repulsion, so there was a guy named William Gilbert, and he was a physicist. I think he was like 1600s, maybe before. I could be wrong, could be 1500s. I think early 1600s. And he was looking at magnetism, and it was called a lodestone, which I actually just found out about today, where it was this mineral that was iron oxide, that a stone that they used even in ancient China, where it would just attract iron to it, so it was basically a magnet. And he was doing all these different experiments, and long story short, he comes to the conclusion that the Earth is a giant magnet, and there's these two poles, the North Pole and the South Pole, and polarity is where there's two opposing forces. There's positive, negative, and when they come together, positive, or positive, negative, they either attract or repel each other, like you think about a common magnet. And when the compass points north, that's going to the North Pole. It goes in the north direction because it's attracted to that. If it goes in the south direction, it's being repelled by that. And what I didn't realize, which is so obvious, I just never even realized, but the northern pole, Arctic, the root word means northern, or it could also mean cold, I think, but the Greek word means like the north. And then the Antarctic, which is ant meaning the opposite of the north, is the southern pole. So you got the Arctic Ocean in the northern pole, and the Antarctic in the southern pole. And there's these two poles north and south. It's just a constant example through everything you think of it. It just goes through so many different topics. If you think about popular stories, movies, literature, there's always good and evil, you know. If you think about Star Wars, I think this kind of demonstrates it pretty well about the Force. First of all, magnetism, he discovered that there's this magnetic force that was attracting and repelling things. In Star Wars, there's the Force that the good and evil, the dark side of the Force and the light side, and they oppose each other. But there's also a constant theme that there has to be a balance of these forces, and you can't really have one without the other. So if you think about good and evil, you know, they say you can't have good without evil, or you can't have evil if you don't have good, because it has to be kind of a deviation from good. Anything evil is a deviation from good. So they kind of have to both be there to exist. You can't have imperfection unless you have perfection. It's a way to reference it as a certain standard. You know, they say like you can't know what a crooked line is unless you've seen a straight line, or I think I just butchered that, but it's something along the lines where you have to have a certain standard that you can appeal to even know what something deviating from that is. And so when the forces are balanced, it's like a state of equilibrium. And I guess that's what makes for the good story, is if there is a hero and a villain, because if it's just a hero or just a villain, it just kind of defeats the whole story of defeat or victory. There has to be two opposing sides of each other. And not just opposition, but sometimes they can complement each other. Like you think about male and female, or certain things that are maybe different or opposite in a way, but they actually attract each other and complement each other, and the differences cause them to come together. I think a lot of people, I think C.S. Lewis, he kind of referenced the yin-yang thing about black and white, good and evil, order and chaos. And then Jordan Peterson's popularized the order and chaos thing about light and darkness, and how darkness is a state of chaos, order is a state of light and truth. When you're studying chemistry or looking at the attraction, repulsion, or action and reaction thing, it's like a constant state of things are either uniting or dividing. And when they unite, they become a bond. There's different types of bonds, you know. The stronger the force, or there's a strong bond with a strong force that kind of go together. But if there's a weak bond, it becomes a weak force, and they split apart. But also the idea, or not the idea, but the fact of like friction. When you learn in physics about friction, is just something opposing. It's an opposing force. And whenever something is opposing, it's causing friction, it's making it harder, it's not smooth, it's not going with the current. It also has to do with like a currency, how when you think about magnetism, something can be conducted that makes it a stronger attraction to it with the current, or it can be something can make it not as attracted to it against the current, and it doesn't conduct as good. Like the current is not as strong or can't even get through. So I thought a good line when he was talking about the ebb and the flow of the sea, like the tides, they go up and down, up and down. It's this constant like back and forth thing. And that relates to all of human nature, is just ups and downs, ups and downs. I mean, civilizations rise and fall, stock market up and down, up and down. Your whole life is going to be ups and downs, ups and downs. It's just constant rising and falling like a tide. Also, in a lot of philosophy, for example, Descartes, in the meditations, he's talking about mind and body dualism. And dualism is kind of goes off into some different topic about mind and body, which is not what I'm talking about as far as dualism. I'm just talking about black and white, left and right, up and down, two different, it's called like a bifurcation when it splits into two. There's two different things that we usually categorize everything in. I mean, you think about politics, how it's just these two different sides. You take this side or that side, they're always opposing each other. But the reason they both exist is because there has to be an opposition. If they unite perfectly, then it just becomes one. And then they'll eventually split up and you'll have revolutions or people that rebel or the resistance. I mean, in a lot of stories, films, movies, literature, there's always some type of resistance to the current. There's one stance or ideal everyone has, or a certain group has, and then there's a resistance to it. Like I think in Star Wars, there's the resistance or the rebels, I don't know. But they're always opposing some force. That's also a part of human nature, is we're always trying to rebel in a way. And then once there's a rebellion, there's a revolution, and it starts up a new constitution or coalition or ideal. And then one generation goes by, and then there's already another revolution where they want to oppose that one. And it's just constant reforming everything, but every time there's a reform, there's going to be someone that disagrees with it. And also like cause and effect, heaven and earth, divine and carnal. That's another thing about the material world. The immaterial world is this dualistic thing about, if you look at the School of Athens painting, you look at Plato pointing up, Aristotle pointing down. It's the heavens and the earth, or the immaterial eternal world, the forms, or the material temporary world, things that change. I guess things that exist kind of have to have a polarity. Like there's a certain polarity of forces to all things. All things kind of have something that's gonna oppose it, or counteract, contradict, or you have something for, you have something against. And it's kind of like that in everything in a way. I mean, there's always someone for and there's always someone against, and that will just how it will always be. There's just this polarity to everything. But if you look at chemistry and you look at how the elements interact or anything in nature, they're necessary to exist something that is opposing it. Sometimes something opposing it can like inhibit it from uniting, but sometimes it's necessary for it to oppose, because if it doesn't have an opposition, one will become a weak force, it won't go stronger. And you could also argue some things can't even exist without their opposite. Like for example, the good and evil thing. Evil can't exist because you have to have good to have a standard to it. It's just a deviation from it. I think that was pretty much all I got. But all these forces that are either attracting, repulsive, they're either attracting you or they're repulsing you. They're just necessary, but there has to be if you want a stable system, you have to have an equilibrium state. You have to have, if you just think about Star Wars, like the dark side will never fully win and the light side will never fully win. They'll just kind of come to a state of like equilibrium in a way. I mean, if one takes over the other, eventually it's just going to start back over the same process. I mean, think about the Garden of Eden, how it's this perfect state, or heaven, and then you have Lucifer, the angel that rebels and creates this opposite kingdom, and it's just this opposing force. It would just always repeat the same cycle. Even if you have perfection, you'll have a being seeking imperfection, which is kind of hard to comprehend. How can you have a perfect being create an imperfect being? And they say free will about It gives the option to choose. But I guess one practical lesson is when there's a certain currency, and there's a certain current to something, you don't want to create friction and oppose it. You want to go with the current. You think about the ocean current, the boats that go against the current, or against the sailboats that go against the wind. It's a lot harder. But if you go with it, it carries you. So you want to learn to go with the currents of everything in your life. I mean, with the current of relationships or job, you kind of have to go with the flow of things so it can boost you forward. You can't always be opposing everything. These people that are always just taking the opposite side of everything, playing devil's advocate, you're not going to get far in life because you're just constantly opposing everything, and no one wants to get behind that in a certain way. There's some groups that form about like they want to be, the resistance, rebels against the current or whatever. But unless you get a big group of that they're actually creating their own current to go the opposite way. And they're trying to oppose in a way that they can beat the other side. And that's the difference between victory and defeat in a war. That's really what it is. It's a war. Everything in nature is a war. I mean, in theology, it's a spiritual war. Everything's in a war. And you either have war or peace. You have things that are opposing each other, or you have everyone in united community with each other. One final thing is Plato, and he talked about dualism. There was the sensible world, which is like the body, the temporary, and then there was the intelligible world with the forms, the eternal, the soul. So there's the soul that's eternal, the body that's temporal, and the soul, the body is just a vessel. The soul is like the essence. It's the same thing in Christianity with the spirit and the flesh. Matter and spirit. Matter is a material thing. Spirit is an immaterial thing. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You'll begin to see like so many different contexts how this applies to. Also, this polarity thing. There's one side of it, and there's another side of it. And these are the two forces that are opposing each other. But there's also this spectrum in between. And people that are black and white, I agree with that. There is a black and white thing to everything. But the gray area is really just a spectrum in between the black and the white. And it's like, can you reach a middle ground in between these two? I don't know. But it will lean usually more towards the black or more towards the white in a certain way, whatever you're talking about. Is there perfect middle grounds, perfect equilibriums? I don't know. I'm not sure on that one. But even if it's in an equilibrium state, it will eventually start leaning to one side. I feel like it will never just remain in perfect equilibrium. It's like your body. You are in a state of homeostasis where you're at a certain equal state. But there's always going to be fight or flight. There's always going to be something that causes it to go up or causes it to go down. Causes your heart rate to go up, causes your heart rate to go down. Then it will sometimes kind of maintain, stabilize, but it's constantly being unstabilized. Everything in your life is going to be like that. You're never going to have, you might have a small, stable moment in your life, or you think it's stable, but then you're just going to go right back down, or maybe sometimes you go up a little bit. And you need to learn how to appreciate the ups and realize it's not going to last forever. And then when you're down, you have to realize that's temporary as well. It's not going to last forever. And then when you're in the middle, just appreciate that state too. It means you're not down. And that's all I got.